The date is March 22nd, 1945. The Third Army is tearing through the collapsing remains of the German Reich. General George S. Patton, the most feared Allied commander in the European theater, is at the height of his power. His tanks have crossed the Rhine. The war is weeks away from ending. Every operational logic, every strategic doctrine dictates that the momentum must be maintained forward, crushing the last organized resistance. But on this evening, inside a dimly lit command post, Patton issues an order that stops his staff cold. It is not an order for a breakthrough. It is not a sweeping flanking maneuver. It is an order for a puncture wound, a deep, narrow, and entirely suicidal thrust 50 miles directly into German-held territory. The target is a place called Hammelburg, specifically Oflag XIII-B, a German prisoner of war camp. Patton summons Captain Abraham Baum, a 24-year-old armor officer. Baum is a hardened combat veteran, but when he looks at the map spread across the table, he understands immediately what is being asked of him. He is being handed a death sentence. Patton orders Baum to take a small, fast-moving column, roughly 300 men and 57 vehicles, including Sherman tanks and half-tracks, smash through the German front line, drive 50 miles behind enemy lines without infantry support, liberate the camp, and fight their way back out. In the context of late-war Germany, the roads are swarming with retreating, desperate, and heavily armed Wehrmacht and SS units. Sending 300 men alone into that chaos is not a rescue mission. It is a sacrifice. The room is heavy with silent tension. Patton's commanders, including General William Hogue, push back. They tell Patton it is too dangerous. If a rescue is absolutely necessary, they argue, send a combat command. Send 3,000 men. Send a force large enough to survive the encirclement that is guaranteed to happen once the Germans realize what is going on. Patton refuses. He insists on a small task force. He claims a larger force would draw too much attention. But the officers in the room, looking at the hardened face of their commanding general, sense that operational security is not the real reason. There is something else, a hidden variable that Patton is not putting on the operational maps. What Patton does not say out loud to Baum, what he deliberately omits from the official briefings, is the name of one specific prisoner held inside the wire at Hammelburg. A name that makes this mission deeply, dangerously personal. Major John K. Waters, Patton's own son-in-law. For the first time in his career, the man who built his legend on cold, calculated military logic is bending the machinery of war to serve his own blood. And 300 American soldiers are about to blindly pay the price for it. The preparations are frantic and shrouded in silence. Baum is given no formal written orders, only a nod and a directive that sounds more like a prayer than a military command. His force is a motley crew of armored veterans, men who have pushed across France and through the Siegfried Line, but they are unnerved by the lack of reconnaissance. They are heading into the unknown. On the evening of March 26th, the column rolls out. The sound of their engines is muffled, an unnatural intrusion into the quiet German countryside. As they cross the line of departure, the psychological toll begins to manifest. This is not the standard armored advance. Usually they have artillery cover, air support, and infantry to clear the flanks. Here, they have only speed and the desperate hope that they can move faster than the German response. They are ghosts moving through the graveyard of the Third Reich. Every shadow in the tree line looks like a Panzerfaust team. Every distant engine rumble sounds like an ambush. Baum navigates by dead reckoning, his eyes glued to the map, watching for the markers of the camp. But the deeper they push, the more the reality of their situation sets in. They are alone. Behind them is the safety of the American lines. In front of them is a vast, hostile landscape filled with remnants of the German army that have not yet surrendered. The silence of the German villages they bypass is the most terrifying part. It is not the silence of peace, but the silence of a cornered beast watching them pass. The column moves with a desperate, jerky cadence. They encounter sporadic resistance, small units of bewildered German soldiers who are more surprised than aggressive. Baum's men deal with them brutally, efficiently, and move on. There is no time to take prisoners, no time to secure the area. They keep the pedal to the floor. The mission is becoming an obsession. For Baum, it is the weight of his command. For his men, it is a gnawing fear that they are driving into a trap set by a ghost army. They are now miles behind the front. Radio silence is absolute. If they get hit, no one is coming to help them. They are a single spark in a dark forest, and they are about to strike a match. The men in the Shermans are tired, their nerves frayed to the breaking point. They don't know the full truth of why they are there. They only know that the general, the man who never loses, sent them here. And that faith, for now, is all that keeps them moving forward. As the night deepens, the column becomes a phantom in the German heartland. They are moving along secondary roads, trying to avoid the main arteries where the Wehrmacht still maintains order. But the fog of war is thick. Reports drift back to Baum. The Germans are everywhere. They are not just fleeing. They are coalescing in the confusion of a collapsing front. The mission, initially envisioned as a lightning strike, is beginning to feel like a walk into the mouth of a cannon. By early morning, the tension inside the lead tanks is palpable. The men are operating on pure adrenaline and a blind, unquestioned loyalty to Patton. They pass burning supply trucks and abandoned German armor, the scattered debris of a retreating army that is still lethally dangerous. Every mile is a gamble. Baum knows the clock is against them. The mission was designed to be a dash, but the terrain and the constant, unpredictable skirmishes are turning it into a slow, agonizing crawl through hostile territory. Suddenly, the lead tank halts, a roadblock, not a coordinated defensive line, but a chaotic cluster of German vehicles and infantry desperately trying to move west. The Americans do not hesitate. They open fire instantly. The silence of the night is shattered by the thunder of 76mm cannons and the staccato, rhythmic roar of .50 caliber machine guns. It is a brutal, short-lived firefight. When the smoke clears, the road is littered with the twisted metal of German transport and bodies in the dirt. But the noise, the deafening sound of the battle, has echoed for miles. The only advantage they had, the advantage of surprise, is gone. Baum looks at his watch, his face grim. They are behind schedule. He can feel the eyes of the German army turning toward them. The realization hits him with the force of a physical blow. They are not just moving toward a POW camp. They are moving into a closing pincer. German commanders are beginning to communicate. They are asking questions about who these Americans are. Deep in their rear, driving toward a camp that holds some of the most important prisoners in the Reich. Baum orders the column to press on, but the mood has shifted. The initial confidence of the advance has been replaced by the cold, hard realization of their profound vulnerability. They are driving toward Hammelburg, but they are doing it as an isolated invading force in a sea of enemies. There is no turning back now. There is no extraction plan, and there will be no mercy from the forces they have drawn toward them. They are 300 men, and they are finally closing the distance to the wire of the camp. Dawn breaks over the rolling hills surrounding Hammelburg, but there is no beauty in the morning light, only the sharp, biting chill of reality. Baum's column crests the final rise and sees the objective. Oflag XIII-B is not the small, isolated outpost the intelligence reports promised. It is a formidable complex, a sprawling prison fortified by machine gun nests and overlooked by ridges that are now crawling with German infantry. The element of surprise, shattered by the earlier firefight, has left the Americans naked in the open. As the Shermans roll toward the gates, the camp erupts into chaos. American POWs, hearing the familiar roar of tank engines, break from their barracks, sprinting toward the fences, screaming in disbelief. It is a moment of pure, raw human emotion, the sudden, violent intrusion of hope into a world of barbed wire and starvation. But for Baum and his men, the joy of the prisoners is overshadowed by the crushing weight of their own situation. The Germans are not running away. They are swarming the hillsides, bringing up heavy artillery and anti-tank guns that have been hidden in the tree line. Baum forces his way into the camp, the Shermans crushing the gates. Inside the mud-slicked compound, they find Major John K. Waters. He is thin, his face gaunt from malnutrition, but he is alive. The mission, in its most basic personal objective, is technically a success. But the victory lasts only seconds. From the surrounding woods, the first German mortar rounds begin to fall, walking their way toward the center of the camp. The rescue has triggered a tactical nightmare. The German response is immediate and overwhelming. They do not care about the prisoners inside. They care about destroying the American steel that has dared to penetrate their lines. Within minutes, the camp becomes a kill box. Baum tries to reorganize his men, attempting to signal the prisoners to mount the vehicles, but the coordination is disintegrating. The 300 men are now outnumbered by thousands. In the chaos, it becomes clear that the intelligence was not just flawed, it was disastrously wrong. The camp wasn't just a prison. It was a logistical hub sitting in the middle of a German tactical reserve. Patton's mission to save his son-in-law has essentially walked 300 men into the middle of a hornet's nest. As the shells begin to shred the wooden barracks and the Sherman tanks take direct hits, the men realize that the drive back out is going to be infinitely more dangerous than the drive in. There is no escape route, only a slow, violent attrition. The pride of the Third Army is trapped, and the cost of the general's secret order is about to be measured in blood. The escape is even more nightmarish than the approach. Baum's column, now a jagged collection of burning wrecks and limping armor, turns back toward the American lines. But the trap has fully sprung. German units, alerted by the thunderous gunfire of the raid, have effectively blocked the withdrawal routes. It is no longer a tactical retreat. It is a desperate, bloody brawl for every yard of mud-slicked road. The Shermans, running dangerously low on fuel and ammunition, are being picked off one by hidden anti-tank guns that roar to life from the dark, unforgiving tree lines. Inside the remnants of the command vehicle, the atmosphere is suffocating. They are carrying the freed prisoners, but the weight of the mission, the sheer, agonizing futility of it, is crushing them. Men are dying in the dirt for an objective that, in the harsh light of a gray morning, reveals itself to be a lethal phantom. The intelligence reports had promised a lightly guarded camp, an easy strike. Instead, they walked into a hornet's nest. Baum realizes the terrible truth. They were sent here with blind optimism, or perhaps with a terrifying cold indifference to their survival. The German artillery does not stop. It is relentless, turning the landscape into a churned-up mess of twisted iron and broken bodies. Baum's men fight with the ferocity of the damned, but they are fighting both physics and math. There are too many German defenders, too much armor, and far too few American shells remaining. The task force is being methodically shredded. Every time they lose a tank, the column loses its fragile ability to protect the wounded. Amidst the suffocating smoke, the men talk. Not about the glory of Patton, not about the grand strategy of the Third Army, but about the absurdity of their situation. Why were they here? Why was the risk so disproportionate to the potential gain? The name Waters is whispered among the officers, a secret that has now become an open, festering wound in the collective consciousness of these 300 men. They are realizing, with sinking hearts, that their lives were the currency spent to balance the personal books of their commanding general. They are waiting for air support that never comes. They are abandoned, a small, forgotten force left to wither in the final, chaotic days of a collapsing empire. The silence of the countryside has been replaced by the absolute roar of total war. And in that roar, the men of Task Force Baum are discovering exactly how little their lives mattered in the grand, ruthless calculus of George S. Patton. The mission was not to win the war. It was to rescue a son-in-law, and the cost of that ambition is now being paid in full. The end comes not with a final heroic stand, but with the grinding halt of engines run dry. The attempted breakout is a massacre. Baum tries to lead the remaining vehicles through a wall of German fire, but the trap is too tight, the defense too coordinated. They are forced to abandon their tanks, now nothing more than steel coffins. Baum and the surviving men scatter into the dark woods, but the German ring is sealed. Some are killed in the desperate scramble, while others are rounded up by the very infantry they had hoped to bypass. In the chaos, Major John K. Waters, who had tasted freedom for a few precious, fleeting hours, is wounded and recaptured by German forces. The men who risked everything for his extraction are rounded up, their fate sealed in the prisoner pens. Of the roughly 300 men who set out on this rescue, nearly all are killed or captured. It is an unmitigated disaster, a total loss of manpower and equipment for a goal that achieved nothing but heartache. Patton's reaction to the catastrophe is initially one of shock, followed by a cold, calculating shift into self-preservation. When the news reaches his headquarters, the general who prides himself on his brash transparency in combat becomes a man of shadows. He denies the true objective of the mission. He buries the fact that his son-in-law, John Waters, was the singular target. The official reports characterize the mission as a necessary reconnaissance in force, a standard strategic maneuver to test German defenses in the region. Patton successfully shields himself from the massive blowback that would surely have ended his career. But the truth is a stubborn thing. It leaks out. The whispers among his staff grow louder, and the families of the men lost or captured begin to ask questions the army cannot easily answer. Patton is forced to live with the knowledge that he broke his own rules, that he ignored the professional counsel of his senior officers, and that he threw away the lives of his best, most trusted soldiers for a personal gamble. History remembers Patton as the man who raced across Europe, the master of the tank charge. But the raid on Hammelburg remains the dark stain on that legacy. The moment where the machinery of war, led by a brilliant but profoundly flawed commander, ground up its own men for the sake of his personal kin. It is a haunting, quiet reminder that in the machinery of total war, even the greatest heroes are capable of decisions that defy the very honor they claim to defend. The lesson of Hammelburg is not just about a failed mission, it is about the heavy, inescapable, and often invisible weight of command, where the line between a soldier's duty and a leader's arrogance is drawn in the blood of those who follow.